Eneuri Acosta is the chief operating officer of Hodinkee, what used to be characterized as the world's largest watch blog. However, I feel even that seems somewhat diminutive today. I wanted to talk to Eneuri because the site has grown into an absolute powerhouse within the watch industry, and I really thought he would be a great voice of insight regarding the business side of things. Eneuri and I met this past December during Hodinkee's 10-year anniversary event in New York City, where we quickly began talking about cars, let alone the limited edition Gronfeld watch he had on his wrist. I mentioned wanting to host him on the podcast, and he was quick to say yes. Now, not many people in his position would be quick to agree to something like this, especially since the pod hadn't even launched yet, but that's the kind of guy Eneuri is. He's seemingly always smiling, and there's just an aura of optimism about him that is almost tactile. I was enthralled with his upbringing and how he found himself as the COO of a company I've been religiously paying attention to for the better part of a decade. He's a watch lover and unquestionably a car guy, so this was truly a blast to take part in. So I hope you guys enjoy it as well. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast. Well, Eneuri, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Wesley. It's a pleasure to be here with you, man.
It's good to see you again.
We met at the 10th anniversary of Hodinkee in New York City, and you were kind enough to come all the way cross country for it and to hang out with us for a weekend. So, man, we really appreciate that.
It was a blast, man. The panels were great. Just seeing the faces that you always see on Instagram come to life, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's really fun. You guys did everything, just knock down, drag out, just killer.
I appreciate it. It was a labor of love, for sure. The 10th anniversary for us, obviously it was a big moment, a big milestone for the company. But for us on kind of behind the scenes, it was 8 months in the planning, to get everyone aligned, reach out to potential panelists, get guests involved, get the programming situated.
Sure.
And then execution, it's almost like a blur. It happens over the course of a weekend and then it's done. 8 months of planning happens in 72 hours. But it was phenomenal. It was just the right way to end our 10th year in business, which is spending it with the audience and the supporters that have been with us there from day one, when it was just Ben and Will and Steven kind of working out of a WeWork space to the team that we are now.
Right.
And kind of being able to celebrate that was definitely a moment.
Super special.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You guys could certainly hold your heads very, very high.
Thank you, sir.
I think everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was
and
good.
It was so good because I never felt there was an ego in the room. I really felt like, and I don't want to use terms like community, and because they're oftentimes overused, but it really is a community. There's like-minded people there, but then you also have very differentiated types of personalities,
right?
And geographically,
right,
as you mentioned, know.
I think it's one of the, and it's funny, every time that we do an event, we see a little bit of it come to life, and it's always heartwarming to see it, where you have, sometimes we have, Hodinkee readers that are as young as 10 and 12 years old, and they're coming to our events with their little swatch on, and they have something that they can relate to the most seasoned collectors, which is just this passion about watches, and it's always great to see that come to life. And the 10th anniversary was just a perfect example of that.
Sure. Yeah, I could totally see how that would pull on the heartstrings.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's talk a bit about you personally. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast, Northeast, in a little town called Paterson, New Jersey.
Okay.
Which has a little bit of a reputation these days for kind of, being kind of like your tough inner city kind of vibe, but it has some merits to it. It's Larry Doby, who's the first African American baseball player to break into the American League, is from Paterson. Ruben Hurricane Carter, I believe is his name, which I believe is the character that Denzel Washington played in the movie The Hurricane.
Okay.
But a boxer who was in
I was gonna say he's got to be a boxer.
Yeah. Yeah, he's from Patterson. The movie Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman was based on Eastside High School in Patterson. So it has a couple of, it used to be known as Silk City back in the day. It was one of the largest producers of silk in the United States. So
no kidding.
Yeah, it has a really interesting history. So I'm originally from the Dominican Republic.
You were born in Dominican?
I was born in the Dominican Republic, yeah. And I came to the U.S. when I was 6 years old.
Cool.
So I consider myself, at this point, kind of like fully Americanized.
New Jersey.
And I'm from Jersey. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So Spanish-speaking household?
Yeah.
Always?
Yep. Still speak Spanish daily with my parents.
That's awesome.
Still go back to the Dominican Republic every couple of years. And
is mom cooking Dominican food?
All the time.
That's
well,
great.
not as much as she used to anymore. At this point, she's just kind of like tired of it all. She's like, "Oh, you guys fend for yourselves."
Right.
But
you're a big boy.
Yeah, we're
out.
adults now. We can figure out how to feed ourselves. But no, always good to get a little home cooked meal whenever
Cool.
I do go back home.
Well, what brought the family from Dominican Republic? What mom and dad do?
Honestly, just opportunity.
Sure.
It's your classic kind of immigrant story. Both of my parents come from very, very little. My dad has a 6th grade education. My mom has a 6th grade education. And so they came to the United States really looking for a better opportunity for their kids. When my mom came here, she worked for 15 years at a book factory, literally like gluing books together, binding books. My dad, so we came here and I came here in 1988. My mom had been here for a year or two already. My dad came in 89 to the States. And his first job here was working the 3rd shift at a Holiday Inn. He was a janitor.
Wow.
And and I remember it was clear as day, as if it were yesterday. It was, he had to walk about 7 miles to work every day at, 10 p.m. to be to work by whatever time he needed to be at work,
No
kidding. Because he didn't have a car. And so when the bus wasn't running, he needed to just walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, he kind of, it's the classic American dream. He worked his way up to eventually owning his own businesses and being a full-on entrepreneur. And that gene was kind of instilled in me at an early age to kind of see what it's like to enjoy the fruits of your hard labor.
Sure.
And so I've always felt like I've had a little bit of that entrepreneur gene in me. And, in this environment at Hodinkee, I think it helps me thrive.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, I would imagine so. What industry was he in?
So he actually went into the grocery store business, So he has it started out with one little bodega, and then it expanded from there to everything from auto dealerships to
no kidding
land ownership back in the Dominican Republic. So he's like kind of like your serial entrepreneur trying out all these different things.
That's super impressive.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So all throughout high school, I worked with him. He made me quit the basketball team after my freshman year, and he's like, "You're coming to work at the family business." And I hated it at the time, but now I look back at it as, life lessons that they're invaluable at this time.
Priceless.
For me.
Sure. Yeah,
for sure.
So you still balling on the weekends or what?
Yeah, every once in a while. We have a little team here in the office.
Is that right?
Yeah. We have a team in the office, and every Thursday we go to play on a church on 13th and 7th here in New York City. We go to play in the basement of a church, and there's about, we try to get 8 guys together to run a little full-on 4-on-4 full court, and it's fun. It's at this point, it's just, how we get our cardio in more than anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
As we get older, that metabolism starts to slow.
It'll
so on
creep up
2-on-2, who are you picking as your teammate in the Hodinkee office? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, man. So Harry Bonet, who is on our shop team, he's kind of like one of the unsung heroes in the office. He and I are kind of guarding each other, but I wish I can play with him a little bit more often, just because we're like the two big boys in the office, so we're kind of banging bodies all the time. And then, believe it or not, you know, Mr. Will Holloway, who some people may know as our director of content and the mastermind behind our Talking Watches series and kind of everything that we do on the video production shot. You know, he's kind of like old school kind of Jeff Hornacek kind of vibe to his game, you know. So it's good to get on the court with him as well.
Oh, man, that's cool. Well, that's really interesting. So then out of high school, obviously working with dad and doing those kinds of things, where'd you go to college?
Yeah. So all throughout high school, kind of worked in the family business and went to a small liberal arts school in New Jersey, North Jersey, called Ramapo College of New Jersey. It was actually not even on my consideration list. I really had just one school that I wanted to go to, and it was Seton Hall University. You know, and it was mainly because it was like a Big East basketball school.
I was about to say it's a basketball school.
Yeah, that's right. It was a Big East basketball school, and you know, I applied and I got accepted and went through. I was essentially going there, and Ramapo College, you know, it was kind of something that, you know, one of my guidance counselor, you know, told me to apply to last minute kind of thing, and I got a partial scholarship, and you know, that kind of sweetened the deal. And I decided to do that, and I thought it was a great fit for me. You know, it's kind of like a small school. It was a big change going, because like you know, when you grow up in a kind of like an inner city environment, you know, you're surrounded by your peers and people that look like you, and you know, it's easy to find like a comfort level. When I went to Ramapo, there was a big adjustment. You know, there were people, you know, that I was interacting with now that are from all different cultures and backgrounds and makeups, you know, and so that was a little bit of an adjustment. And I felt like in that small school environment for me, it was a little easier to adjust. So I have no regrets, you know. So going there, yeah.
So what'd you study?
I started communications, concentrations in PR, you know, and it was mainly because my best friend at the time, his name is Reggie Dans. He was a big influence in my life coming up. He's a little older than me. He's about 4 or 5 years older. So he was kind of like, you know, one of the ones that was kind of like paving the way for us young kids, you know, to sort of see what life outside of, you know, this inner city can be like, and what it's like to be in a professional environment, et cetera, et cetera. And he went into PR, and I'm like, oh man, I want to be just like him, you know. So I went to school for that and kind of made it my own thing at this point, you know. Good 15 years into my professional career. It's completely different from what I went to school for, but
right,
you know, nevertheless, it helps set the foundation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what were some of your first jobs out of college then?
So it's a funny story. My first job out of college, believe it or not, was actually doing PR for McDonald's.
No
McDonald's.
kidding.
Yeah.
Their agency was based in New York, I guess?
They had an agency that was based in New York, and McDonald's was my client. And I ended up graduating from college a semester early. So
smart cookie.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to not only graduate a little early, but I have a job, you know, essentially lined up as soon as I got out of college, and I took it incredibly serious. And I actually ended up missing my college graduation. Get this, because it was the day of my graduation from college was the 50th anniversary of the Big Mac, and so it was a huge deal.
It was a huge push
at the time.
Yeah,
and I remember all of my buddies from college texted me, and they're like, "Dude, where are you? You know, graduation is coming up," and I'm like, guys, you don't understand.
There's secret
I'm
sauce.
Slammed at work right now. It's the 50th anniversary of the Big Mac, you know. And so I look back, it's just such a funny thing now that I missed my college graduation because of the Big Mac.
So what's the date?
I don't even remember.
Oh no, you don't know?
It was around this time of year. It was around graduation season.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of like my first experience after college. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then took, you know, an opportunity to go work for another agency down in Washington, D.C. with a company called Strauss Media, and at that time, that company had just landed General Motors as a big client.
Right.
And so, I got this job offer on a Thursday. That following Monday, I was already living in D.C., had an apartment and all, just did it over a weekend.
Wow.
And I proceeded to spend the next 11 years of my professional career in automotive.
Always in DC?
Yeah, out of DC, out of New York, and out of Detroit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because
Because of General Motors,
sure.
correct. So
were you on the account side?
a little both.
Okay.
Both on the account side, and then as an employee of General Motors.
Sure.
The last 5 years with Cadillac reinventing that brand a little bit. So that was a fun experience. But at first, it was. My job was essentially managing publicity around auto shows for all of the different General Motors brands at the time. So we're talking Pontiac, Hummer, Saab, Saturn, brands that don't even exist anymore.
Yeah, Saturn and Saab.
Yeah, after
rest in peace.
Exactly. After GM went bankrupt, in I want to say 2008 or so.
Yeah,
brands were essentially cut in half.
Wow.
So they went down from 8 brands to 4 brands. So the 4 that did survive, Buick, Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac, sort of became the focus after that.
Sure.
And
which is, from a price point standpoint, kind of the range, right?
Yeah, those were kind of like the brands that, a lot of people at the time debated whether it made more sense for Buick or Pontiac to be the one to survive, right? Because Buick was considered kind of like this old, stodgy brand, and Pontiac was more of a performance American brand, and had, some models that had some historical significance, whereas for Buick, maybe, that brand affinity wasn't as strong, but Buick, believe it or not, was a behemoth in
they
China.
had Tiger Woods,
Exactly.
And then
exactly.
Pontiac, I'm trying to think, like, who was even associated with Pontiac?
So Pontiac was just a regional American brand. Buick,
were they even in NASCAR back then? Because Pontiac,
Pontiac,
weren't they in NASCAR like in the 80s?
I want to say yes, but I'm not.
So I think they even by that point they had pulled out of NASCAR even.
Yeah. But the overall sentiment was that Pontiac was just kind of a regional brand, whereas Buick at least had China as a big market. And believe it or not, in China they were selling close to 1 million cars a year, which is insane. Whereas here in the U.S. they were doing just maybe a third of that, a quarter of that at the time, and so obviously it just made more financial sense to keep Buick around.
So, but you were more in conjunction with Cadillac, you said?
Yeah. So before coming to Hodinkee, I spent about 5.5 years in different roles within Cadillac, doing everything from influencer outreach to brand marketing and kind of everything else in between. In 2014, I was part of a team that helped transition Cadillac to move from Detroit to New York. So that was kind of like a big splash at the time. We had an office down in Soho. We grew a team of roughly 130, 140 full-time employees here. And several projects that we launched at the time. One of the biggest being Cadillac House, which was kind of like an experiential space dedicated to fashion and the arts and whatnot. That was something that I was really involved with at the time.
That's cool.
And so
that was here in New York?
That was here in New York. Yeah, that was here in New York. And then beyond that, I was involved with several product launches, of crossovers and performance vehicles and whatnot. So I had my hands in a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
and it
sounds like it.
Yeah, it was a great experience because it really gave me insights into all aspects of, a really a blue chip global manufacturing and marketing company.
Yeah.
So understanding the ways that businesses run at the regional level, whether it was China or the Middle East or Mexico or here in the U.S., was drastically different, in understanding the nuances and between the way that those markets would operate was good insight, and then frankly being part of the broader General Motors family, which is over 200,000 employees. It's
Huge.
It's huge,
Yeah.
right? It's experience that I felt very fortunate to have gained. And it really gave me an appreciation for American manufacturing, and General Motors is an institution here in the U.S., especially in the middle part of the country, and where Detroit,
Yeah.
Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. A lot of manufacturing in the automotive industry happens in those markets. So yeah, even though I'm kind of this East Coast kid, and born, at least raised here in the East Coast, I spent some time living in Detroit, which was a great experience. Also lived in downtown Detroit, a mile away from the Renaissance Center where General Motors headquarters is. And so yeah, and all those experiences eventually led me to Hodinkee.
Yeah, that was my next question. So what made you take that leap, or was it just sort of a, were your wheels spinning in any way, or
Yeah, no, so when I was at Cadillac, I was kind of part of this group of individuals who were always looking to push the brand forward and align the brand with the next generation of thought leaders and interesting businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And so I felt like I was the consumer that Cadillac was after, right? And so, and what I mean by that, it's it's, you probably hear these buzzwords in business all the time now. It's like everybody wants to get to millennials, right? And know how to how to get on the consideration list of millennials. And I'm 37 years old, so I'm kind of like a senior millennial. I technically qualify within that demographic. But being who the target audience was, I think gave me a real understanding on how to reach that target audience. And so, I started analyzing all the reasons why it was that I was the target audience. And I'm like, okay, so what are those reasons? It's, this inner city dweller, could be black, could be white, could be gay, could be straight, is in the prime years of his buying power, is into culture, understands fashion, understands all these different verticals within the arts that are kind of interesting from a demographic point of view for any company. And so frankly, I started looking at the companies and the brands that appeal to me and said, I want to work with those brands. I want to align Cadillac with those brands.
Sure.
And Hodinkee was one of them, and so I was looking at Hodinkee at one time, and through the lens of a shrewd marketer. It's like I knew that Hodinkee's audience was X, right? Very qualified, very astute, highly educated, passionate. And those were all qualities that appealed to me as a marketer for Cadillac, right? And so we ended up reaching out to Ben. We invited him out to Pebble Beach to Monterey Car Week.
Oh, sure, for the Concours.
For the Concours, and that's how we kind of became friendly. It turns out that we were both more passionate about Porsche more than anything else, which was kind of funny, and how we became friendly. And really, the rest is kind of history. One day he reached out to me and asked me out for a coffee, and one thing led to another, and I came on as COO to really spearhead Hodinkee into its next phase of growth.
That's awesome. Now, when was that exactly?
So that was in, it was actually about 2 years ago now. So around
2 years ago.
Yeah, May, June of 2017.
That's great.
Yeah. So when I joined the company, we were at about 15 employees. We're at 35 now. So the company has more than doubled in the 2 years that I've been here. And
that's awesome.
And it's been a fun ride.
So what types of things took place in the last 2 years that, say, necessitated that growth, for example?
Right. So I think that we were, looking at the company as really untapped opportunities to serve the watch community in a way that was a little bit more substantial than what we were doing from just a pure publishing and content platform
and online
and online
specifically,
and online specifically. Right. So that's a great point. So, if we the first thing that we did when I came on was really take full stock of all the opportunities that presented itself and all the feedback that our audience was providing to us about how they wanted to see the brand evolve. We hear often from watch retailers that the best thing and the worst thing that has happened for the watch industry is Hodinkee, because it's
vintage.
It's yeah, exactly. It's providing a knowledge for consumers unlike any other platform out there, and so more people are becoming interested in watches. The downside is that those customers now go into boutique and oftentimes know more than the actual salesperson. Right. So it's caused kind of, some retailers to really have to step up their game. And
you have this brand loyalty.
Exactly.
About watches that may not even be made anymore.
Exactly.
So then you're trying to shop an assortment that doesn't exist in their current brick and mortar livery.
That's correct. And so, the feedback that we were getting from the community was that, yeah, it was great that we were providing this resource of knowledge, but when they would go out to hunt for watches, it was kind of like the Wild West.
Yeah.
It was they didn't know if what they were getting was authentic or, if a watch had been redialed or reloomed or you name it, and so, when I came on board, the team was already doing vintage. We wanted to take it a step further with everything else that we were doing from a commercial standpoint, sure. And really kind of doing the behind the scenes work that it takes to get the business right for that type of shift. Mm-hmm. So one of the big projects that I took on was to lead us to become an authorized retailer of modern watches. And that was in November of 2017. So about 6 months after I joined the company, we launched that initiative.
That's unbelievable. I didn't realize it was that recent.
Oh, yeah. So it's...
I feel like it's been longer.
No.
I've been watching this stuff for years. So it's kind of...
We're barely a year and a half into that initiative.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And it's we're having great success with it, but it's still very much in its beta and its infancy. So
that's almost scary to think
about. Exactly. And then like if you think of everything else that we've done in between, not only with like the 10th anniversary stuff, but what we continue to do around limited edition watches, what we do with Hodinkee magazine, the Hodinkee radio, kind of like all these other kind of ancillary products that are in addition to our bread and butter, which is Hodinkee.com, just writing about watches every single day.
Content,
Yeah, we've really diversified the product offering. So whether you want to find us in print or in the radio or online, if you want to shop with us, you can do it through the mobile app, or you can do it obviously on desktop. Pretty soon you'll be able to do that in the physical as well, so we keep busy. We keep busy.
Do you find any overlap or sort of similarities between the automotive industry and watches?
Yes.
I mean, other than just like they're both mechanical.
They're both mechanical, but beyond that, it's kind of very traditional industries, very set in their way of doing business. very stubborn and resistant to change.
Trying to get a Porsche these days and trying to get a sports watch from Rolex or
exactly
similar.
Exactly, it's kind of like the same kind of customer frustration.
How much have you spent?
Yeah, exactly.
How many cars you got?
Exactly, which is, it's I think that for, again, those same customers that brands are trying to bring into their world, that's just not the way that we do business, right? That's not the way that's not what resonates with us. So these are all industries that are struggling with being digitized, and struggling with competition from the digital space. In the automotive industry, you see it with everything from TrueCar to Bring a Trailer, right?
Yeah.
And in the watch world is very similar. You have, kind of what's quote unquote the gray market of retailers, which are, everything from eBay to you name it, to vintage, dealers, some good, some bad, that are, attracting a sizable part of the market. And so if you are, Rolex is a unique example. They're just immune to market trends. But if you're everybody else, these are realities that you're grappling with, and then you have the complexities of market trends that call for different priorities. For example, a brand like Omega, the product that sells for them in China is very different from the product that sells for them in the US, right? And which do you prioritize?
Yeah.
Both, obviously, is the answer, but how do you do it in a way that's authentic to both markets, while at the same time dealing with the realities that the way that the customer shops in the U.S. is very different than the way that the customer shops in China.
I think apparel has that in common,
right?
Like just selling clothing,
right. So, yeah, we and then you have little old Hodinkee over here that's kind of doing its own thing in its own way, and so there's just a lot of moving parts in the industry right now, but a lot of similarities to automotive, a lot of the same challenges for sure.
What do you find to be different?
What do I find to be different? Well, first of all, watches are a little bit more fun. There's a little bit more diversity in product, and you can have an appreciation for a grand or a Seiko Alpinist, right, for $500, or even their brands, or a Timex, if you will, or even a Swatch at $180. That could be cool, and there could be an appreciation, as there is for like the rarest of vintage Pateks, right? And so the diversity that exists in the watch space, I find to be really interesting. There are different entry points for ownership within watches. It's kind of easier to get in and out of them to a certain extent than it is for cars.
Same as storage.
Storage is an issue, right?
Storage is a big issue for car collectors.
Yeah. So it's like, and selling cars is not a fun thing.
I used to sell Porsche and Audi, and it's a different type of sales.
Did you do it in a dealership? Or?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It was a Porsche, Audi, Jaguar dealership.
Yeah. So imagine if you're just an enthusiast and trying to do this. It's not fun.
It's very different.
No.
Yeah, for sure. I need to hit pause for a quick commercial from Passion Fine Jewelry and Independent in Time. Passion Fine Jewelry is a welcoming shop located in Solana Beach, California, where owners Jana and Tim Jackson have a deeply rooted understanding of watchmaking and fine jewelry. The store carries everything from Speak Marin, Roger W. Smith, Sarpaneva, Roman Gauthier, Groenfeld, Vianney Halter, and many more independent watches, as well as a variety of rings, bracelets, and necklaces. Tim is GIA certified, and they also have a goldsmith in-house as part of their staff. Visit Passion Fine Jewelry for more information, and if you're ever in Southern California, definitely make it a point to visit the store. You can also find a wealth of information via Tim's blog, Independent in Time, where you're able to dive as deep as you care to into the exploration of horology and independent timekeeping. Now back to my conversation with Eneuri. You were brought on as COO, right?
Yeah, Chief Operating Officer, yes.
So what exactly does that mean for Hodinkee? Like,
Yeah.
What cookie jars are your hands in?
That's a good question. The short answer is all of them. The longer,
ideally, right?
yeah. The long answer is pretty much all the business critical aspects of the job that make the job for our editors really, really fun. So that they have the opportunity to really just focus on creating great content. So that's everything from human resources and bringing on the right people to managing our long-term strategy. Where do we want to be 3 years from now? Where do we want to be 5 years from now? Obviously, finance and managing our accounting processes there to make sure that we're still a company that's in business. It's something that you need somebody to pay attention to, and everything else in between.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the beauty of what I get to do, is that I get to have my hands on everything. I sit on our committee that manages limited editions, so I get to have a say in products as they're being developed with the different brands that we do limited editions with. So that's a lot of fun. And up until very recently, I was also in charge of everything that we were doing on the commercial side for Hodinkee Shop. So it was making sure that our suppliers were in line, that someone at the brand levels for partners that we had on the watch side, I served as their contact and whatnot. Very recently, we brought on an amazing individual. His name is Russell Kelly. Used to be president of Tudor here in the U.S., and he joined our team in February of this year. As our chief commercial officer. So kind of those responsibilities of taking the Hodinkee shop to the next level now fall on his plate. But nevertheless, that was something that I helped develop. That's kind of like all the dirty behind the scenes work that happens at a company like Hodinkee that a lot of people probably don't get to see.
Right.
They a lot of people get to see and interact with the Jack Forresters of the world,
the Bens,
the Stevens, the Caras, and
James,
and our editors. Yeah, exactly. Mr. James Stacy,
very active lately. I've noticed.
and it's great. Mr. Cole Pennington, who's a new contributor that joined our team earlier this year, and what's beautiful about those guys on the editorial side is that they all have their very unique voice, and the products that they're into are so vastly different, that I think brings a good level of dynamics to our editorial.
I think the proof is in the pudding too. When you read each of the articles, like I could almost skip that top line, the by James Stacy or by Stephen J. Pulverin, or and I can almost tell you who wrote the article.
Yeah,
just like their voice is so abundantly clear, which is fantastic, right? Because you can almost find the author within the group that you sort of gravitate towards, and you can just read articles in a different way because of that. I think it's almost like a difference in experience inside the article.
I think that we're incredibly fortunate. I want to say that we have the best editorial team for watches, at minimum in the English speaking world. And I think that again, all these different elements are part of the secret sauce that make Hodinkee as special as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are like the Yankees of writing, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
For the watch industry, because of that, and all these recent acquisitions, the Russells, the Coles, James taking a bigger role, it seems. Take us through how the business has sort of changed in your last 2 years, like just operationally like that.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously the addition, but.
Right. There are kind of like the things that you see that are obvious that are changes within Hodinkee. our editorial voice is expanding and, in our opinion, reaching new readers, and also providing a different experience for those that have been there, from day one. Someone may have found us because they loved what Ben was up to and what Ben's voice was on the vintage side, and kind of exploring kind of the more established end of the watch industry. Whereas, someone like Cole brings a completely different, personality and approach, and maybe gives those readers that have been with Hodinkee since day one something different to appreciate, right? And so those are kind of like the most obvious things. And then you look at the products that we've launched since I've been part of the team, and if you look at what Stephen Pulverin is doing with Hodinkee Radio, I think is incredible. That wasn't something that was here, or what Mr. John Buse is doing with Hodinkee Magazine. It's really a top-notch product, and really takes our editorial and creates sort of like the physical version of it in a way that we think that no one is doing, and not only in the watch space, but in the print journalism and print magazine space in general. But then you look at kind of like all the things that happen behind the scenes, that people may not be aware of how we operate, and that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. Something as simple as making sure that our limited edition calendar is shaping out in a way that doesn't conflict with the overall business, learning the nuances of how each particular brand and group works, and making sure that we're being good partners on the commercial side for those brands. Really adjusting to this environment of being a retailer, and learning that business, and growing it as we go, so that we can provide the best possible experience to our audience. Working with our design and engineering team, which are kind of the unsung heroes of Hodinkee.
Sure.
We like to say that Hodinkee is best described as a content and commerce platform for the world of watches. But really what powers both of those channels is our design and engineering team. So these guys are ex-Apple, ex-Spotify, ex-Warby Parker, these amazing individuals that have, really cut their teeth, at some of the most innovative companies that exist. They also happen to be passionate about watches, and are applying those learnings to Hodinkee. So just yesterday we were talking about improvements that we can make to the Hodinkee shop from a user standpoint, and those things that no one ever knows about,
right.
but they happen, right? And
sure.
you need to constantly be thinking about those things to continue to move the company forward.
Yeah. So what kind of questions do you guys ask each other about, like, the progression of the company? Like, how do some of these things originate? I'd say it's probably not the natural progression to launch a magazine from an online blog. Right. Usually, maybe historically, it was vice versa. Like, say, I don't know, Architectural Digest or somebody like that. Maybe a better question: what was the lead-up process like to launching the magazine? Just to use that as an example of a product that's come out recently. Right.
Well, I think that one thing that's ingrained in the DNA of the way that we do business and what we want to do is that at the end of the day, our overall common goal, no matter what area of the company you work on, is that we're all just really passionate about making watches fun, right? And it sounds pretty simple, but if we take that approach of like, how do we make people that don't know anything about watches become interested in watches, and how do we make people that are interested in watches fall in love with watches, then that's a pretty simple guiding principle in the way that we approach things.
Sure.
So what that very simple approach leads to is a constant curiosity on how we can make things better, on how we can all make this a company that we're incredibly proud to work for, but at the same time can be anything that we want it to be, right? So, some of the best ideas of how we move the company forward come from junior staff that are kind of like back of house, that are just, interacting with customers or readers, and they'll say, hey, it's this, we should do this, just because it'll make the process.
So there's just an
better.
open forum often.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
That's really cool because, I come from a retail background where you can easily feel like a number, like early days of sales, you have no visibility on corporate. You have no idea what conversations are like, but that's also the beauty of working with a small company.
Right.
And 35 people in this day and age, whereas I don't even know. Amazon's probably got hundreds of thousands of employees. Perhaps.
Right.
I don't even know. But
I'll give you an example. When we were launching our e-commerce platform to be an authorized retailer of watches, we all sat down and we said, okay, we all buy watches here. We've all bought from vintage dealers to, kind of secondhand dealers to boutiques. What are the things that we love? What are the things that we hate? Well, some of the things that we hated was, if you wanted to buy a watch from a boutique and that boutique was across country, you're buying a watch that costs X number of thousands of dollars and you'd get charged shipping on top of that. Right. And that was always kind of like a crappy experience. Right. Or, you'd order a watch thinking that a particular retailer had it in stock, but they don't. So now you have to wait 3 weeks or whatever until they order that watch from the manufacturer to then send it out to you. And that was kind of like a crappy experience. And so we said to ourselves, okay, it's like none of those things are going to happen if somebody buys a watch from us. So it's like, if another thing is, if you wanted to buy a particular watch, you either had to be a customer or you had to have made X number of purchases or spend X number of dollars loyalty before being considered. Sure. For us, it's like, no, none of those things apply. It's like, if we have something, if you see something that's available on Hodinkee.com, we have it, and if you buy it, it'll be at your doorstep the following morning by 10 a.m. on us. Oh, and if you're not happy with your product, you can just ship it right back and we'll give you your money back, which is unheard of in the watch industry. It's like the most that you can hope for is to get a store credit.
Yeah, I was about to say a credit. Yeah.
And like, what good is in some cases, a $50,000 store credit to someone, right?
Well, so. and like in my case or many other people's cases, like I'm completely aesthetically driven. So maybe that's the only watch from that brand you really liked.
Right.
So then I got 50 G's tied up in a brand that I don't even like anything else the way it looks on my wrist, for example.
Yeah. And this is kind of like the way that the industry has done business for years. Because of our very nimble approach, we can say, okay, we don't have to do business like that. Our customer experience doesn't have to be that. And we get to change it.
Sure. Well, it seems like everybody in the office is super motivated and really positive. Everybody's fighting for that common goal, right? So what are some of the hardest parts that you've experienced since your time? Like, what's tough?
No, staffing. Staffing is hard, and because it's so important, from where I sit, to make sure that we foster a company culture that encourages that level of innovation and outside the box thinking and really creative. Everybody at this company has the opportunity to be creative on something, and so that's difficult to cultivate at times, and finding people that are passionate about not only their own professional development and growth, but also the growth of this company, is something that it's important for us to keep an eye on, to make sure that we're fostering the right way. Sure. I think that, one of the things that has allowed me to be successful as an employee of this company is that I was a reader first. I've been reading Hodinkee since 2010, 2011, and so I from as an outsider, I understood the brand, so every once in a while I'll put on my Hodinkee reader hat, when we're, in a strategy meeting about something, and I'll think to myself, it's like, would I like this as a Hodinkee reader? Would I find value in this? Because oftentimes, and you probably experienced this in your car days, is oftentimes red tape is created for the benefit of a company, not for the benefit of a consumer, right? And so that's something that I always keep top of mind to make sure that we're fostering an environment that our staff can thrive in, can feel comfortable in, can feel like they're contributing to, and that are excited and proud about, the growth that we're going through right now.
Sure. So what do you find to be the easiest parts then?
Oh man, the easiest part is just like sitting back and getting to enjoy all the wonderful watches that come through this office. Just today we're doing a big editorial feature that's being worked on right now as we speak, and I won't give away any details about it. There's
a lot of buzz in the office, it seems. I'd never been here before, but you can tell like people are busy at work.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a lot of buzz.
Yeah. So today is one of those days, and you'll know once you see the story hit Hodinkee that what the story is that we're working on here.
I was gonna go because I met David the day I met you at H10, and I was going to go over and shake his hand and say hello, but he had a camera in his hand and he's shooting something. Now that you're saying this, I'm glad I didn't, because maybe that would have been a spoiler, seeing what he's shooting perhaps. I don't know, but I didn't go say hi because I didn't want to interrupt him, obviously.
Yeah.
Now you're mentioning this, I'm like worried. Well, maybe he would have given me the Heisman Trophy. Maybe
maybe when we turn off the mics, I'll give you a little sneak peek of what we got going on over here. But it's going to be one that I think that our audience is really going to love.
Usually, when you guys think so, that answer is yes. So, just so you guys are aware, the buzz inside the office ended up being the fact that they were shooting one of their famous videos called Reference Points, which is a walk through a particular type of model of watch in each iteration or generation, if you will, as they've updated it. This particular video was about the Rolex Submariner. So everything from its inception onto how the watch appears and wears and functions today. Really, really cool stuff. So if you haven't seen that, jump over to YouTube or Hodinkee's site and check out Reference Points. Just a further deep dive into the watch world if you're into it. And always great to see Eric Wind, who was a previous employee of Hodinkee and an ongoing contributor, no less. But Eric's a great guy, and I got to see him again. So anyway, back to my conversation with Eneuri. Well, that's awesome. Well, so what kind of business advice would you give to people? You went from a liberal arts college to PR to Cadillac to Hodinkee.
Yeah.
Obviously, your learning curve has moved and shaken with your movements, I would imagine. But like, what kind of advice would you give others that are trying to find their tribe? So to speak?
Right. I think that. So. Obviously my background is very non-traditional. I started off in one industry, and 13 years into my professional career, shift into something completely different, and oftentimes along the way kind of reinvented myself. And so the advice that I would give someone is to really not be afraid to take a bit of risk with their professional development, even if it's something that you think you're really passionate about in your 20s and your 30s. If the passion is not there, it's okay to start over. because, spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing something that you don't like is just not good for your mental health and your your emotional health. Sometimes I find myself in the office as early as 7 a.m. and it comes 7 p.m. and I'm still in the office, and it never feels like I'm going through a 12-hour workday. It's never, a dreadful scenario where I feel like I'm just like underwater with something. I'm here because I love it and I'm passionate about it and I believe in what we're doing, and I get to work with amazing individuals every single day who I feel need me, right? And and I only consider myself successful at what I do if the people around me have the resources that they need to be successful at their jobs.
Sure.
So that would be my advice for sure.
That's great. Sidestepping from a little bit of the business and talking about you. So wrist check, first of all. What are you wearing today?
So today I am wearing a Langa Sone 1815 Chrono.
Now that's manual wound, right?
Manual wound chronograph from 2004. I recently put it on a slate gray Sedona strap from the Hodinkee shop that we launched about a week ago. These straps were in development for a good 10 months, I want to say.
Now, what makes those straps different? Like, why was there such a long lead time?
So the finish applied to the leather, it's unique. Believe it or not, it's something as simple as the stitching on the strap is something that we gave a lot of thought to. When we first developed our strap, they were mainly for vintage watches. So we preferred a more vintage aesthetic to it. So a lot of the straps that we had, say if you had a brown leather strap, it came with like a white stitching. For this particular strap, we color matched the stitching to the actual leather band. And so like little subtle details like that take time to execute and produce and do them the right way.
Sure. Now, where are those made?
These are made in Italy.
Italy.
Yeah, these are made in Italy. And so, but no, this particular watch I got for myself as sort of a gift to myself when I joined Hodinkee.
That's quite a gift.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. And it's one that I think I'll keep with me for a very long time, just because I have some very fond memories of like those first moments being here after coming from like an institution of General Motors to this little scrappy startup, if you will, at Hodinkee. So
now Ben has a similar watch, or does he no longer have it?
He no longer has that watch. So there may
is that his watch?
There may have been some wheeling and dealing on the side at some point.
Got it. All right, understood. So there's been thought about a collector gene. Mm-hmm. Do you think that exists between collectors? Like it's genetically you're predisposed to collecting?
No, no, I don't. I because if I take myself, for instance, my interests vary so wildly, and at any given point, I'm interested in something completely different. And so I feel like if there's like such a thing as a collector gene, and you want to be in something and you want to go all in on just one thing only, I think that most people are more interesting and more diverse than that. And so, I could be really hardcore into watches for a little bit, and then I'll put that aside and go play with, tailoring, and then I'll put that aside and I'll go play with cars, and so, I think that we as individuals are so much more diverse to say that, there's a collector gene and we only want to focus on one thing.
Right.
So.
Well, I think just in general, just being a collector in general. So you collect watches, you collect cars, you may collect shoes, you might, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I
those three in particular.
Yeah,
are
for sure.
Very often Three subjects.
They go together quite often. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are kind of like the things that, especially with men, feels like it's socially acceptable to really go deep on and hoard, if you will. I don't know. Maybe there is such a thing as a collector gene. Maybe it's just an appreciation for like really beautiful, well-made things, and like in this day that we live in where, there's so much kind of mental stimulation being thrown at you, and everyone is kind of trying to get in front of you and vying for your time and attention, that the things that really bring you joy are the things that I guess you want to collect long term and want to have be part of your life long term. So
yeah. Well, we've obviously been talking cars a little bit.
Yeah.
What's in the garage?
Some Porsches, some primarily Porsche. I do have one car that I love. I have a 1992 E34 M5 Touring, which wasn't sold here in the U.S. And it's a pretty cool car, kind of like understated, and a lot of people don't know what it is. It's like a station wagon, but it's not, so that's fun.
You put that alongside James Lambden's? His M5?
His M5. His is a lot more modern than mine. I've been in that car. It's a sweet car. And I remember when he first bought it, he brought it over to my place one year for Christmas Eve dinner. And he was just so proud of it.
I remember when he got that car. I was like, well played.
Yeah.
That's a great body style.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's probably like the last M5 that a lot of people feel really passionate about.
Yeah. So what Porsches do you have?
So I have a 73 and a half 911T in ivory over a brown leather interior with steel wheels, and it was actually my first Porsche. I bought it from the original owner with 36,000 miles on it.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was I found it online, and and it was just kind of sitting there, and I reached out to the gentleman that had it, and he was selling it on behalf of the original owner. And he's like, yeah, we've gotten tons of offers on it, but the owner just wants it to go to someone that's going to appreciate it for what it is, not a flipper or kind of like a dealer or anything like that. So he's being like really picky. He was saving the car to give it to his daughter. So he drove it pretty consistently for the first 10 years, put about 20,000 miles on it. And over the next 23 or so years, put an average of about 100 miles on it, just because he wanted to preserve it for his daughter. Turns out that when his daughter came of age, she didn't want it. So it became my car to care for once I got it. And I love it. It's such a understated car. So I feel like such a gentleman every time that I'm in it. The color palette is really soft. It's not one that is typical on most 911s. It has steel wheels, so that's like one thing. It has like this brown interior. It's kind of like a buttery ivory color. So it's just a really understated car. And so I have that. I have a 96 C4S that I got as sort of kind of to be a quote unquote daily driver. I love the 993 body style.
That's one of my favorites.
It's an amazing car.
Yeah.
I mean, that car is just such a tank. It's like not even a flat tire. It just goes. It's just a tank. It's just such a well-made car. Even like the simplest things, when I get in the car and I close the door and I hear the ping, of the door closing, and I think to myself, it's like, geez, man, this is almost a 25-year-old car, and it still feels like it's as solid as it was when it came out of the factory.
Yeah, I've always said that you can tell so much about a car just by the way the door shuts.
Yeah, and
just that sound.
Yeah, and so I've come to appreciate Porsches quite a bit. I also have a 1970 911T in leaf green, which I bought from Mr. Spike Ferriston.
So that was your car out in L.A.
That was
the art space.
That was my car.
Yeah,
that was my car.
I heard through the grapevine it used to be Spike's, but
yeah.
I didn't know the current owner.
Yeah,
that's a gorgeous car, man.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Honestly, it was. I'd been drooling over that car for such a long time. And one day, listening to Spike's podcast, he had made mention that he was thinking about selling it in passing, and I kind of latched onto that and sort of reached out to him afterward, and so it became my car. And so, because Spike lives out on the West Coast, I just kept it out there for a little bit. And
so is it still out there though?
No, now it's here on the East Coast. Here on the East Coast. It was I had it up in Greenwich, Connecticut this past weekend for the Greenwich Concours.
Oh, good for you.
So it's one that I'll keep forever.
That's one of those cars that I just envision being driven during the fall up in somewhere like Greenwich.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's just the funny thing is that, so the 1970 is a 2.2 liter 901 transmission. The 73 is CIS 2.4 liter 915 transmission. A lot of people, especially my wife, say to me, it's like, you're ridiculous for buying a car that's essentially the same, between 1970 and 73. And it's like, yeah, they're the same, but they're not. It's just completely different driving experience.
I was about to say the drive is totally different
between the two. And then, even if I add the 993 into the mix, yeah, there's a familiarity in the way that things are laid out. Where the radio is, where the ignition is, where your hands kind of gravitate to the right place, but every single one gives me a completely different driving experience, and a completely different feeling when I'm behind the wheel. And that's something that I think adds to the allure of Porsche overall, is that they've mastered the art of evolving. They never feel like they need to revolutionize a product. They just need to evolve it.
Because the DNA is still there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? Watches are very similar to that, to me. Even if you're, say, loyal to a brand,
yeah,
there's very often times when you just get something that looks very similar, but, well, let's take a Datejust, for example.
Right.
You've got a domed, or a fluted bezel
yeah,
versus, a domed bezel or a flat bezel. Date, no date, two-tone, stainless. It could be the exact same watch, but just change the metal, or fluted bezel, or Jubilee versus Oyster. Totally different feel. And quite literally, too, because the Jubilee will literally wrap around your wrist different than an Oyster.
We were just having this conversation in the office last week. And Ben, Steven, John, Jack Forrester, and I, we were talking about the same exact thing, and Rolex came up as the prime example. It's like, whether it's an Oyster Perpetual or a Datejust or a Date-8 or Daytona or Submariner, you look at an Explorer, you look at the evolution of any of those products, and you can trace back to the original references DNA.
Right.
I mean, even the Explorer up until just a few years ago was only sold in one size. Right. Yeah. And so that's part of the allure, in my opinion, of Rolex, is that level of consistency to do very simple things, but do them excellently every single time, and having the consistency, but really more the patience to stick to one thing for 50 years. Doing it consistently for 50 years is something that should be admired, and they'll, from one year for another, sure, they'll make changes to a watch, and they'll make changes that they don't even publicize, that make their products better.
Right.
So
yeah, for them it could be power reserve.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. So we often talk about like how Porsche is the Rolex of cars and vice versa.
Sure. Grail car.
300 SL.
Going.
Got it.
Going.
I know the car doesn't have windows that roll down, and so it's like a sauna being in there, but style over comfort on that one.
So, Grail watch.
Grail watch. That's a good question.
You've had to think. You've had to thought about this before.
I do and I don't. It's almost like the type of thing that, being in this industry, you get to see so much that after a while it all becomes a blur, and so there are product and watches that I absolutely love but have absolutely no interest in owning, and so but I can definitely appreciate them for what they are. I don't think I have a Grail just yet.
That's amazing.
I think that's the answer. I don't think I've seen the watch that says to me, I need to have that and I will keep that forever. There are watches that I'm emotionally attached to. Like the first watch that my dad ever gave me was a two-tone Datejust. That was, the first nice thing that he ever bought for himself.
What year did he buy that?
He bought that secondhand in the mid-90s. And he gave it to me in 2010. He gave it to me when I bought my first place. He said to me, if you're responsible enough to have a mortgage, you're responsible enough to have this watch. And that was the watch that kind of helped spiral it all. So that's.
So were you reading Hodinkee before or after that?
Like right.
I was going to say,
like
because the timeline.
Right. Yeah. Like literally like the day after I probably found Hodinkee.
That's funny.
So there are watches that I'm emotionally attached to, but I don't think I've seen my Grail just yet. I haven't seen that one watch that's just like, I have to have that tomorrow and it'll stay with me forever.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, what's on your wrist that's a heavy hitter for me.
Well, you know what? I find myself appreciating Lange quite a bit, not only for their product, but what they represent. It's almost the details. It's the devil's
their finishing,
everything, and they do it in such a cold German way that it's almost charming.
100%.
It's like
there's a restraint. Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
Visually, for sure.
That's right. There's no compromising in any aspect of the quality, and everything that they're going to do it to the highest standards possible, and I think the fact that they're kind of like an underdog brand that not a lot of people know about attracts me to them even more, because you want to see a brand like that win.
Yeah.
So
what do you look for in a watch then? Like why does a certain watch stand out to you over another? I mean, as I mentioned, I'm kind of aesthetically driven.
Yeah.
Though the mechanisms and the finishing and all that is fantastic.
Right.
As does the price going up. This
right.
is pretty fantastic.
Right. I think that those are definitely elements that every person considers. Is like, first and foremost, you have to be able to see something and look at it every day and have it appeal to you. You know, it's like you can have the most technically complicated watch, but if it's not beautiful to look at, it's just not going to appeal to you.
Sure.
So I tend to go through phases. A couple of years ago, I was really into vintage watches. At this point, I haven't bought a vintage watch in probably a year and a half. So I've been buying a lot of modern watches. So a lot of modern watches are appealing to me quite a bit. The things that I look for are consistency in design, cohesiveness in design. It's
throughout their history, you're saying?
Throughout
brand history?
No, and just
on the piece.
And just on the piece.
Sure.
Right? So, if you look at this Lange, It's 39.5 millimeters. It's probably like 11 millimeters thick. It just sits on my wrist perfectly. I love that the sub registers are slightly below center at 3 and 9 o'clock. I love the rehaut and the different layers of visual levels that the watch gives you, you know. So all of those little details to me, and that's just on the dial, right? And then you turn it over and it's like a little city back there, right? You know, so it's just beautiful to look at it from all angles. You know, one watch that I found some beauty in that a lot of people hated, like just absolutely hated, was the AP code 1159.
Okay.
So that was a really controversial watch.
I hear it's better in person.
So I spent a lot of time with it at SIHH, and I completely understand why in photos people will look at it, and I get it. I completely agree that the dial design was just a little bit too, you know, generic for it to be what it was. But man, the details on the case of that watch are incredible in my opinion.
3-piece construction, right?
That's right. The level of finishing was just so next level in my opinion. The way that they integrated, you know, the kind of octagonal design that AP is known for into like the side profiles of the watch, and the way that they blended polished with brush finishing, and I thought it was a really interesting, innovative thing. The way that the crystal was domed
yeah.
in a way that allows for legibility from many different angles. I found all of those things technically interesting and technically beautiful. I just thought that they swung and they missed on the dial design, which is, you know,
a major component.
It's a major component at the end of the day. Yeah. But, you know, I can look at that watch and I can appreciate it for what they were doing. So I guess going back to your original question is like, what are the things that speak to me is cohesiveness and consistency in design.
Sure.
You know, so
that's cool.
I try to stay below 40 millimeter just because I feel like it wears on my wrist a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know, I try to stay below 13 millimeter thickness because I feel like that just wears a little bit better on my wrist. I prefer a leather band over a bracelet. You know?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
So what are we talking rotation? How many you got in the rotation?
I try to keep at least 5 at all times.
Gotcha.
In rotation.
Yeah.
And then the rest I, you know, take in and out of storage.
Are you a watch then outfit guy, or are you an outfit then watch guy?
I think the watch that I'm wearing every single day is definitely considered, you know, based on what my day is going to be like.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, if I'm wearing a suit, there's a certain kind of watch that goes with that, and if I don't have any major meetings and I get to be a little bit more comfortable, there's a watch that goes with that, you know, and then there's watches that I wear in a way that is non-traditional just for the hell of it. You know, sometimes I like wearing jeans and a white t-shirt with a Grand Seiko SPGW 252, which is a time-only gold watch, which is by all other definitions a dress watch.
Sure.
You know, and that feels great to me.
I like the high-low thing.
Yeah.
I like the high-low approach personally.
Indeed.
So you still have the two-tone Datejust that your dad gave you?
Oh yeah.
Obviously, that's probably sticking around forever. What's the dial color on that one?
It's like a creamy off-white kind of
like champagne
finish. Yeah, like a
champagne.
Not like a full champagne. It's more like a creamy eggshell.
Cool.
White with Arabic numerals.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like kind of like a plain.
You keep that on the bracelet, the two-tone?
I keep that on a bracelet. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's none other than your standard two-tone Datejust, man. It's like
Super special though.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's special for me in ways that it was very different from why it was special to my dad.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, my dad got that watch because when you make it in life, you go out and you buy a Rolex, right? And that was it was almost like his symbol of arrival, that, he came to this country later in life to, really provide, better opportunities for his children. And he bought this watch to symbolize that success. For me, every time that I wear it, I'm reminded of my very humble beginnings and the fact that, my family comes from nothing at the end of the day. And through hard work and perseverance and honesty and being a good person, you can go somewhere in
Sure.
life. So
that's awesome. What so we've talked watches, we've talked Porsches, obviously. It seems classic style is running rampant throughout the office, like just with apparel and such.
Yeah.
Multiple 1016 owners, right?
There are a couple in the office. Yeah.
And then Speedmasters,
Left and right.
Yeah, are everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you believe in the philosophy that you have to have certain watches in order to be considered a real collector?
No.
Because that's a conversation people have. It drives me crazy.
No, I don't. I
didn't anticipate you would.
I don't even know how to define what a watch collector.
Well, everybody, you need a GMT, you need a moon watch, you need a day date, you need, the list.
You really just need things that appeal to you and make you happy.
Totally agree.
And that's kind of how I've approached it.
Yeah.
And I've tried to disassociate this hobby from it being a transactional kind of thing. So I don't consider whether a watch is going to be worth X in a number of years after ownership, when I'm considering buying something. I rather keep it simple and buy watches that make me happy.
That's great.
Because that's kind of like what collecting should be about, right? It's about doing something that kind of makes you happy rather
100%.
than viewing as something for kind of what is perceived to be an investment or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
I don't want to make a mistake. It's like no one wants to buy a watch and the next day is worth 40% less.
Right.
That's obvious. No one wants to buy a watch and, find out later that it's been redialed or whatever the case may be.
Franken watch.
Exactly. You don't want to buy a Franken watch, so you need to watch out for yourself. That's very different than, treating something that's supposed to be about an experience, making it more about like an asset, if you will. So.
Sure. You and Ben connected over Porsche, obviously. He's got that Zagato on order, doesn't he?
Ben,
Spike talks about it.
Yeah. So
I don't know Spike. I mean, I say his first name because I also listen to Spike's Car Radio.
Yeah.
I feel like
which is a great podcast.
We've exchanged messages and pleasantries and such.
He's a really nice guy. He's a really down to earth dude. Ben has a. I'm gonna blow up his spot a little bit here.
I'm dying to know when these things are getting delivered. Just as a Porsche geek myself.
Yeah, I may have heard through the grapevines that his should be coming very, very soon.
Cool.
But yeah, he has, I believe it's a 1959 a 356 Z, as in zebra, bodied by Zagato. So apparently this was a car that Porsche sanctioned back in the 50s to Zagato. There was one prototype that was made. That prototype was crashed, and so the car was never made. And very recently, the guys at Zagato found the blueprints for that car and decided to take 356s and completely strip them down to the chassis and rebuild them and give them this new body finish. They're absolutely stunning.
Yeah, they look sick.
They're pieces of art, So
are there other Porsche guys in the office, or are you two?
There are a couple of others. So Mo Ali, who's our director of product and strategy and runs our engineering and design teams. He is a 997 guy.
That's a great body. That's what was just coming out when I was selling them.
Yeah. So he has a GT3 997.2. Cole Pennington is also a Porsche guy.
Targa, right?
He has a Targa. I want to say it's an 85 Targa.
I don't know Cole.
Yeah. Oh,
Instagram.
Yeah.
I can thank Instagram.
So yeah,
I'm not a stalker, Cole. I'm not a stalker.
Cole's a good guy. He has a Porsche.
Do you guys do Hodinkee rallies? What's going on here?
Oh yeah,
you guys should totally do that.
Yeah, for sure. Every once in a while, we'll get together on a Sunday morning and go out. Andy Yang, who's our director of marketing, he's I appreciate his pick probably the most. He's an American muscle car guy.
Okay,
so he's into Mustangs quite a bit, and I respect the fact that he fights off the urge to follow the crowd,
right?
And so he's in his swim lane and he's loyal to that swim lane, and I can appreciate that too.
Well, the Standard H logo stems from the old, Volkswagen buses.
That's right.
Some of the old Porsches, but then it crossed over to those old Mustangs.
That's right.
So from the Standard H perspective, I get hit from all walks of life wearing, my T-shirts around, and people are like, yeah, Muncie shifter. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. I was like, how did you know? It's so it's cool. That crossover's fun, but I commend him for abstaining from the Porsche.
That's right.
The shield.
I appreciate someone that's like, following his own flow.
That's awesome. Well, we kind of already talked about, what makes the 911 so special. I was going to ask you about what other products come to mind too that are just as special as the 911, but we were kind of touching on the Rolex things too.
Yeah.
So, just to wrap things up then, I'm going to take a page out of the Hodinkee radio book and talk about the Nomad Hotel's chicken. Have you had it?
Yeah, of course.
I've had it as well.
Of course.
So that was my test. Does that live up to the hype in your opinion?
That's a better question for my wife, who's like the foodie between us and follows probably every single restaurant here in the city. My wife is the noble one. She runs marketing for the food bank for New York City.
Wow.
So she's doing kind of noble work, and at the same time,
and still on brand, being a foodie.
She's a foodie, so I would say that it probably does live up to the hype.
Yeah. I thought it was delicious. You definitely need to share it though, for sure.
It's
certainly meant for two.
Yeah, it's meant for two, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Anything else in New York City that you would recommend? If there's like a one to-do list of maybe even a couple things. What's a can't miss here in New York City?
What is a can't miss here in New York City?
Like if you'd never been here before, where would you tell somebody to go? Or a restaurant, wherever.
So there are some things that you can do here in New York City that we that live here probably don't take advantage as much as we should. Something as simple as like taking a stroll through Central Park is on a day like today where the weather is 70 degrees and it's not as humid as it gets here in August is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So those are kind of like the more obvious things that I would say. Other than that, there's a great bar down here in Soho that makes great drinks called Madam X that I love. If you're looking for a great Italian meal, it kind of doesn't get any more homey or better than Carbone here in Soho. The best brunch spot in the city, I think, is Seydel's is right up there with the best of them. So kind of like in the food scene and in kind of like the cocktail scene, those would be the places that I would recommend. There's a little bakery called Maman, MAMAN, which is right down the street from our office. It's a little French bakery that has just nailed it from everything from the food to the aesthetic. Just absolutely love their whole vibe. It's where I go every morning to get my coffee. So that spot is really fantastic. But the beautiful thing about this city is that it's so diverse that it's like no matter where the neighborhood you are, you know, if you're just paying attention a little bit, you can discover something really awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, Eneuri, this has been super fun. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate you thinking of me for this.
Yeah, of course. Is there anything else you wanted to add or promote or?
No,
We've talked Hodinkee Mag, right?
Yeah,
Volume 4 just came out.
Hodinkee Magazine Volume 4 is available now. The rest of this year, where we have, it's, I don't know when you're planning on running this podcast, but we have so many other amazing things right down the pike. Really soon, we are going to be launching Hodinkee.jp, which will be Hodinkee Japan. So it's going to be our first international market.
So all written in Japanese and everything?
Hodinkee will be translated in Japanese, so we're really excited about that. We're partnering with Hearst in Japan. So they've been great partners. So that's something that's like right on the horizon for us. Later on this year, we will launch the physical home for Hodinkee. So we'll have the Hodinkee shop in the physical. So it's going to be an experience space in Soho where folks can come in and interact with our editorial team and can see content being created live, maybe watch a live talking watches as it's being filmed or something along those lines, you know. So it's going to be, you know, what we think is the physical manifestation of the Hodinkee world. So that's happening later on this year, and you know, just really fun and exciting things right on the horizon, you know, that we're awesome. All really looking forward to.
Well, congrats on everything. Everything you guys are doing obviously is just knocking it out of the park. And obviously I'm speaking as a fan, which is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you. So really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, sir. And congrats on the new podcast. And I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much. All right. Talk to you soon. I'd like to thank Eneuri again for taking the time to talk with me. It was really fun getting to know him on a deeper level, as well as getting a bit more insight into the Hodinkee business. Each episode has been brought to you by Passion Fine Jewelry, Clear Audio Headphones, and the music has been provided by Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful. As always, jump over to standard-h.com and pick up a hat or a t-shirt you may enjoy. It really does help us keep these things going, as does subscribing and rating the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.